Hello and welcome to this podcast interview for Wisconsin Association of Scholars. With me is W Lee Hansen. Uh, Lee, I'm very interested to talk to you about your work in general and particularly your most recent book. But first things first, how are you doing?
Well, I'm doing pretty well for a 96-year-old guy whose eyesight is failing and who is having greater difficulty writing and reading and so on. But I'm busy at work on a memoir of my Korean War experience, and I'm pretty almost done with it and hope to send it off to a publisher soon.
Excellent, excellent. That's
Yes.
great news. Uh, I was going to ask some about that towards the end. I think that'll be a
Okay,
good thing for people to look forward to then. I'm glad to hear it's nearing
good.
completion. So you are an extremely prolific author and researcher, which people can find out about for themselves by going to wleehansen.com. A very impressive list of articles and other writings and publications, but I'd primarily like to talk with you this evening about your what I believe is your most recent book, Forgetting and Forgotten: Dementia and the Right to Die, which is a rather heavy topic, but one we can't and shouldn't avoid nonetheless. It seems to me that this book serves a dual function, both as an autobiography and then also as a source book, a resource book of information for people who find themselves in similar circumstances. Is that right?
Yes, that's very correct. Yes. And in
Um,
fact, I could even call this talk Dementia Strikes Again, because my youngest brother began showing signs of dementia a while back and is now in memory care.
I'm sorry to hear that. Well, and one of the main takeaways of the book that I got at any rate was really your wife Sally's belief that everyone should be able to decide for themselves. I mean, we're all individuals. We should be able to decide for themselves under what terms we would want to die. But there seems to be almost an irony in that, unlike for children, we decide for them because we know that as they get older, they get to a point of maturity where they might look back on decisions that they made when they were younger and thought, okay, I wasn't of my full mature mental capacity at the time. But with dementia, it goes the other direction, and you need to be able to have the ability while you are still in um, have your full capacity of reasoning and thinking to say under what terms it would not be worth living and under which terms you would like to die. Is that Am I right that that's kind of one of the most salient takeaways?
Yes, that's correct. And it began back in 1980 when Derek Humphrey, an Australian newsman, began organized the Hemlock Society, which had a rather formidable name and that put off many people. But Sally found out about it. We both joined, and we attended some meetings at the First Unitarian Society in Madison, where there were two people who were members and were strong believers in the right to die. So that became a part of our thinking way back 1980 onward.
All right. Well, from a standpoint of National Association of Scholars, you having been played a very important leadership role in National Association of Scholars and in general in the academic freedom movement in Wisconsin. I know that this organization of which we are both a part values the ability to do free inquiry, and which sometimes leads to conclusions that very much challenge our established beliefs. So for some people are very set in thinking that any type of euthanasia is to be opposed. But you provide a book that makes a strong case anecdotally and I would say empirically for the ability to choose under what terms to die. I think the empirical component of it is probably derived from your long history as an economist, that's your way of thinking, the way that you go about systematically studying and gathering information to make a case. Did you kind of you proactively went about establishing such a case? Yes?
Yes, yes, right. And yes, my training as an economist has taught me to look at the evidence, mobilize it, and try to present it in an effective way that will convince people, or at least inform them of another possibility. And right now in the state of Wisconsin, there are several legislators, I think there are now about a dozen, who have signed on to a medical aid in dying legislation, but they have been unable to get a hearing on it. And it goes back probably a decade or more. I think Fred Risser first introduced it probably 10 or 12 years ago, but it's not gone anywhere. And, in Wisconsin, uh, the, well, I would say that it's a sort of a revolutionary idea for many people. And in addition, there's a strong Catholic population in Wisconsin that is resistant to this idea, as are many Protestant believers. So it's not something that people can just jump up and down and agree to. It takes long legislative efforts, as Compassion and Choices is doing. Compassion and Choices is the successor to the Hemlock Society, and it has a more friendly name than Hemlock. And they have now secured right to die legislation patterned after the Oregon law of 1997 in about 10 or 12 states. So they're making progress and feel that they are making progress in other states as well. But there's also strong resistance to that legislation, often court cases trying to contest it.
Mhm. Well, it's good to hear that progress sounds like it's being made.
Yes.
Uh, to me, the part of the book that just really could be a gold mine to somebody who finds themselves in similar circumstances is the rather extensive toolkit for caregivers. I wonder, would you elaborate on kind of like how you came to assemble the various components of that and which things you think are have been the most beneficial to you?
Right. I first stumbled upon a final choices document in the Journal of the American Medical Association back in about 1988 or 89. It was something that somebody had simply typed up on their computer and was inserted in a page in this article in JAMA. I got a copy of it, and my wife and I quickly signed it, saw our lawyer, and got him to more or less endorse it or verify that we had done it and were of good mind. And gradually, the state began to move in that direction. By by 2007, the state had its final no, its oh, what was the title? Had a document the in which you would specify what you wanted and signed it, and it had some legal standing. Uh, oh, the slip of the mind. Anyway, it's now been elaborated further, and what I would recommend to people is a copy of this booklet called uh, How to Make Life Decisions, put out by Compassionate Choices, and it includes the official state form as well as Five Wishes, another document put out by another Right to Die organization, and a lot of other information that will help families begin to talk about this matter early on when they still have all of their marbles, so to speak, and can be regarded as knowing what they were doing. So this is an invaluable aid, and I recently got a couple more copies for my daughters and I, and we are going through it, checking all the boxes, so they know exactly what I want to have happen to me. And of course, I'm getting closer and closer to that time every every day, and I want it done right. But I can't go all the way for fear of legal liability to my daughters. Because if they are assisting me in some explicit way, they could be charged with murder. And who wants to see a headline, 96-year-old retired prof indicted for murder of demented wife? That would not be a happy occasion for anyone. So I am trying to get everything lined up properly, and then it forces you to think about what you want to do with all of my books and papers and so on that I have accumulated that I hate to give up.
Yes. Well, now it can be, I don't think it's all that infrequent with a book that there are either certain things that either didn't make it into the book or that after the book is published, which is of course one finite date, that kind of occur as possible additions since then. Were there either other aspects to the toolkit that you might expand on? What is kind of additional rest of the
Yeah.
story as
Another useful publication is Final Final Exit Network, which is concerned with the process of dying and was uh, uh, a member of the board of directors who recently died was Derek Humphrey, the fellow who set up the Hemlock Society and has been a strong supporter throughout his lifetime of the right to die. This is a very informative magazine that comes through 3 or 4 times a year, lots of stories in it about individuals who made the decision, how they did it, and one can go to the internet, type in Final Exit Network, and you can probably see this publication, and you can join the organization if you wish and be assured of receiving information. They are also running webinars on various topics that you can sign up for if you're a member. And I'm too busy to do that myself, but a lot of people might find that very helpful.
Mhm, mhm.
Another source of information is a woman named Teepa, Teppa, Snow, Snow. She's a sort of a caregiver practitioner who now operates mainly through the internet, videos, publications, Zoom meetings, and so on. Back about 10 years ago, she came here to Madison 3 or 4 times and gave very, very effective demonstrations about simple things that you can do to make caregiving easier. For example, one is how you hold the hand of a person you're talking to, a person who has dementia. You want to do it in a non-threatening way. And she shows you exactly how, calling on somebody in the audience to come up, and she does a demonstration. So Tipa Snow, again, internet, dial in her name, and you'll see what she has to offer.
All
The
right.
other thing is to begin talking about this with your children or other relatives so they know what's on your mind, and hopefully convince them that you know what you're doing and that you don't want to suffer prolonged suffering, as my wife did. Her dementia went on for 10 years, 7 years at home, and then I had to have her institutionalized because she was falling and still driving and small accidents and so on. And it became imperative to have her get constant care. But that creates difficulties too. The nurse here at Oakwood Village, when she was in memory care, wanted to give her a medication called Seroquel, an antipsychotic. And I said, fine, great. And she communicated with the doctor, but they had difficulty communicating, getting in touch with each other. And finally, I did contact him. He was treating her for depression, which she had suffered periodically. But depression and dementia often have symptoms that are quite similar, hard to distinguish. So I got copies of the 50 odd articles that the Federal Drug Agency used to give Seroquel a black box warning, meaning danger of death. To my mind, the odds of death were so small that it was insignificant. And even if it doubled with Seroquel, it was still under 5%. Well, 5% at 85 or 90 or 95 is not all that bad. But had great difficulty convincing the UW doctors to prescribe that. Finally, I said, let's have a telephone conversation with my daughters, which we did with the doctor and the social worker. And once she heard what we had to say, she agreed to that. And that made an instant difference in Sally's behavior, much less tense and disruptive. And during that conversation, I noticed tears coming from her eyes. And I asked her later on what the tears were for. And she said she was so pleased that we were all on the same page on what should be done with Sally. Uh, she said often kids come in from out of town, they want to take charge of the case, and don't know what they're doing. But anyway, she said she was so pleased that we all agreed, and that we had talked with Sally about this long beforehand. So that's an important thing to do, because otherwise you're adrift. You don't know what you should or could be doing.
Very good that people can think about those things in a timely fashion.
Your voice is chopped off.
Sorry, yes, to think about those in a timely fashion is
Yes.
so so important, so helpful.
Yeah.
Now, Lee, have you been contacted by other people who have been in similar circumstances and expressing a gratitude for your book?
Yes, I have. And I've given several talks on it to elderly people. And the their attention has been very active, no drifting off to sleep or anything. But yes, they have. And a number of people said that it was so gratifying to see what I had gone through and to realize that maybe their situation was much less. And what I have not yet said is that Sally knew she wanted to die uh, over the last 3 years. And in the last year and a half, every time I came to visit her over at a place, memory care, Bright Star here in Madison, she would say, Lee, help me, I'm dying, I want to die. And, that's like a knife going into you. And hearing it day in, day out was very difficult. And in fact, I did not go and see her every day. It was too wrenching and experienced to have to see her in this helpless state, nothing I could do. And, all I could do was grin and bear it, as they say.
I'm sorry I had to go through that, Lee, and that she did too. What is the best way for people to get a hold of the book?
Well, you can go to Barnes and Noble, and they may have copies. I'm not sure. I don't keep track of that. Or you can order it through Amazon, and it'll come in a day or two. It's what, 17.95 or thereabouts. And it's, I think, a good read. I worked on it carefully. I had a woman editor help me. And she thought I was too chronological and too analytical. And she said, Lee, you've got to have a story that you're telling. And I realized I had it. It was right in front of my nose, namely her belief in her right to die. And that became the theme of the book. So, yes, people have enjoyed reading it. And I haven't been invited to any big TV shows or anything, but I hope it's getting wide readership.
Yeah, thank you for writing it. Now, also, let's see, your upcoming projects are not just on the Korean War, but on reinvigorating liberal education. So, can you talk some about these current projects that you're working on?
Right. My trouble is I have too many ideas and too many things to work on, and they all take time. And I'm getting slower at doing it than before. Yes, the Korean War memoir, well, it goes way back. In college, when I came to Madison for junior and senior year, I wrote long letters to my parents because they had not gone to college. They were smart people, but it was not something that was in the cards in those days. And my mother kept all my letters. Actually, I asked her to do that. And so immediately after graduation, within 2 weeks, the Korean War began. And soon I was drafted. And so again, I told my mother, please keep all my correspondence. And so she put it in a box. And it was sometime later that I was busy in my professional work as an economist here at UW-Madison. And it wasn't until 2002 that I went back to Turkey for a 50-year anniversary visit to see the place and sort of relive my life. Prior to that, I thought I should read these letters that I wrote to see what I said. So I took them all out of the envelopes, Xeroxed them, and bound them. And I have, well, they're not right here, but I have 4 1-inch thick volumes. One of my letters in the States, the second in my letters from Turkey, third, all of my orders sending me here and there in Turkey and elsewhere. And then the fourth, a lot of documents about the Aid to Turkey program that I have been using to help write this memoir. In addition, I've collected a lot of material since then and at various times drafted material. I spent 3 days at the National Archives going through the records of the called Joint American Military Mission for Aid to Turkey to find documents that I thought were there, hoped were there, that would fill in the gaps that I, as an enlisted man, was not privy to. I went over there as a PFC, promoted to corporal, finally to sergeant, but I'm not sure I was getting all the communications that were going to the officers, most of whom were lieutenant colonels and colonels, highly ranked guys, and master sergeants who were experts in signal, ordnance, artillery, and so on. So anyway, I developed this habit of writing things down. And as Sally's condition deteriorated, I began writing notes on her behavior because one day turns into another. You can't quite remember what happened when. So I have a year's worth of very detailed notes on her behavior. And then when I would visit her when she was institutionalized, I would usually come home and sit down at my computer, writing out a paragraph or two about what happened if anything significant occurred. So I had very good records. And I guess I'm a guy who just keeps those good records on all kinds of things. So that's part of the background to this story.
All right. All right. Well, Lee, go ahead.
Well, then the liberal arts education, I had an interest in teaching all along. Actually, I got experience in the Army at Camp McCoy. I was a troop information and education specialist, giving weekly talks about why we were fighting in Korea and things like that, and became a teaching assistant and taught for many years. But I was interested in how to become more effective in the classroom. And I developed what I call the expected proficiencies in the major. What do we want our students to do the day after they graduate? They're never going to take another test of the kind we give, regurgitating what's in the textbook. They're not writing enough papers in school. Faculty don't want to spend time grading them. So anyway, I developed a list of about 6 or 7 proficiencies, operational things that we could look at to determine if they really learned what we hope they learned. And so I developed that back in about early 80s and then practiced it in my teaching in large classes, small classes, and found it very satisfying. And students found it very satisfying as well. The course evaluations, especially on the smaller classes of maybe 50 or less, said this was the hardest course they ever had. And they wish they had taken it as freshmen because they would have learned so much about how to become a better student, how to write more effective papers, how to engage more effectively in group discussion, and so on. So I have the manuscript, a full manuscript written, but I've not had time to revise it. And I should probably find somebody who could help me do that. But on the other hand, most of the material is old now, and no publisher would probably want to publish it. So I'd probably have to publish it myself, which I would be willing to do.
Mhm.
So if there's some expert out there who is interested, maybe give me a buzz and see what we can do.
Excellent. Well, just because it's old information, if it's still true and
Yeah,
works,
yeah.
it's still
McGuffey's
valuable.
reader is still good.
Yeah, right,
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
right.
And then one other project that's quite different. My dad's mother was a Danish immigrant who came over here in the mid 1880s, settled in St. Paul, died of consumption
Hmm.
TB in 1905. She left a batch of 223 poems that she wrote, I guess, in her lifetime here in the States. The My dad got them from his brother, and I made copies of them. And I have had some of them translated and hope to publish a book with the Danish on one page and the English on the facing page. I've done more work on her background. Her mother died of consumption. She died of consumption, and her oldest son died of consumption. So it was in the family, and it was very prevalent, you know, in the 1800s. Many people died. And uh, so, anyway, it seems to me these poems should be archived somewhere, and this little booklet published to alert the world that she did this. The one problem is scholars aren't too keen on them because they're heavy religious overtones. Uh, the uh, piety displayed in them, is not fashionable, but it was very prevalent in the 1800s, and she thrived on writing them. So again, that's partway completed, but I right now I've got to finish this Turkish book, and I'm writing little letters to the editor and so on. Most of them I throw away. I've got a blog that I'm not keeping up. But I guess I'm, as this woman who helps me says, you're a writer. And I guess I am, and I enjoy it.
Outstanding. Well, and with respect to the poems, even if the piety isn't in fashion now, it's interesting how the pendulum can swing.
Yes.
There are some people, for example, in my field, music, who are so grateful that people preserved
Yes.
music even as that at the time was going momentarily out of fashion, but then it
Yeah.
it comes back in.
Yeah. Good.
All right. Well, is there anything else you'd like to add, Lee?
I guess all I would add is that I would encourage more people to take pen or pencil in hand and write down their thoughts about different issues. Maybe write a letter to the editor, maybe write a op-ed piece for a newspaper, and write to your kids. Tell them about your life and what you're doing. My father never said much about his life. We really don't know much about him because he was not inclined to talk. And as kids, we felt somewhat intimidated asking him. And, there was an interesting life that's gone and can't be retrieved. So express yourself. And as you do it, you'll find it easier and easier to do.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that. And thank you for your time, Lee. And best of luck with both disseminating past writings and continuing future writings.
Right. Well, thank you very much. I'm flattered that you asked me, and I hope this will be of use to people. And I urge them to head out and get the book. I expect there are copies in the local libraries, although I'm not sure.
Yeah,
And send me a card, if you will. Write in your reactions. I would be most interested in hearing them.
excellent. Excellent. Well, thanks again, and best of luck.
Thank you, Benjamin.
All
Thank you
right.
very much. Good night.
Good night.